are back at Windrock Park. We have been ripping around in the 2025 Polaris RZR Pro S, and that means it's time for the moment you've all been waiting for, to do 5 things we love about it, 5 things we hate about it, and then we're going to tell you who this thing is for and whether you should buy one. Let's jump right in. Number 1, the first thing we love about this rig is the styling. Polaris redesigned the rig in 2024 for the 2025 model year. The Pro R, the Pro XP, and the Pro S all got a facelift, and we love it. For one thing, Polaris brought back their iconic fang lights. These things debuted in the mid-2000s on the RZR XP 1000. They went away when the RZR Pro lineup came out, but when it was time for a facelift, Polaris brought them back. We love them, and overall, the rig just looks great. The styling is much more striking than on the outgoing model, and it gives it just that Polaris vibe that you cannot mistake. Number 2, Polaris added something this year that none of us asked for, but it turned out we all wanted, and that is these air vents in the nose here. The cool thing is, this vent doesn't go to the brakes, it doesn't go to the transmission, it doesn't go to the engine. No, it comes inside, and it goes to the driver's and passenger's feet. It comes out right here in the cowl, and basically it just keeps positive air pressure in the cabin at all times. Now, you don't get a windshield, you don't get full doors, you don't get windows, you don't get HVAC. You can close the vent or open it. The air coming in keeps things feeling nice and fresh in the cabin, and more importantly than that, it also keeps dust and sticks and rocks and whatever else might blow in here while you're ripping around. It keeps all that stuff at bay. The flowing air keeps that moving out of the cabin and makes it just a much more comfortable place to be. This is a win. We'd love to see it on other rigs. Number 3, we love the interior in this thing. Now, we've complained about it before, but there are a few key things that came out with the update that really make things a lot nicer. The first is these seats. Now, they're generous, they're supportive sport seats, but they don't come from a sporting background. These came out of the Polaris Expedition overlanding rig, and they're just a little bit more generous than the outgoing seats, but they're still plenty bolstered. These things are all day comfortable, and as soon as you sit down, you pretty much forget about them. That is excellent. You don't want to be thinking about whether you need more or less lumbar support as your day goes on. These will save your butt on the trail. They will keep you from getting too fatigued. They're fantastic. A couple other things. 1, this rig comes with fixed harnesses in this ultimate trim package. This is really nice. Now, some people complain about fixed harnesses because they limit your mobility, but this is a fast side-by-side, and when you're ripping around out in the desert or doing some complicated rock crawling, you want to stay where you are. You don't need an inertia reel to reach forward and mess with the stereo. You should be paying attention to your driving, and you should be secure, and with this you are. A few other things we love in here. There's plenty of storage. This is a lot of storage for a sport rig. There's plenty of places to put your phone, your drink, your wallet, your keys. There's cup holders. It's really nicely thought out. And this center stack is redesigned and is really nice. The last thing, these accented plastics. This is a nice touch. It just gives it a little bit more of a premium feel, and it shows that Polaris is thinking about the design. Yes, there are other rigs with nicer interiors, but Polaris really stepped it up a notch this year, and we love it. Number 4 is this engine. It is Polaris's ProStar 925cc turbocharged parallel twin. It makes 181 horsepower, and it's just lovely. It's very playful, it's very eager, there's not a ton of turbo lag, and yes, while it has a little bit less horsepower than some of its competitors and a lot less than its big brother, the Pro R, especially in somewhere like Windrock where there's not a ton of open space, you really don't want for more power. This is a gem of an engine. We really like it. The ProStar line in general is good, but turbocharging kicks it up a notch. It is fantastic. And while I'm standing back here, let's go right into number 5, this suspension. Now, the shocks are Fox 3.0 Live Valve X2 internal bypass. That's really cool in itself, but they are controlled by Polaris's excellent in-house electronic suspension, Dynamics DV. Dynamics DV gives you 4 suspension modes. You get Comfort, Rock, Track, and Baja. And basically what that does is a computer tells the suspension what compression and rebound settings it wants. So you've got Baja, which is basically full stiff for ripping across rocky deserts. You've got Track, which is for smoother courses that are a little bit tighter where you still need the rig to be pretty firm in its stance and handle well. Rock, which gets you through rock gardens, and Comfort, I shouldn't need to explain. The other cool thing is you get a readout on the dash in the ride command that tells you what the suspension is doing, and you can change all those settings on the fly with a button on the dash. The last thing is, Dynamics DV has always had a red button on the steering wheel, which we have referred to before as the panic button. If you come up to a big G out or a rock garden and you need the suspension to go full stiff, you just punch that button. Now in the past, you punched the button, you got 10 seconds of full stiff suspension, and then it went back to whatever setting you were in. But this year, Polaris updated it, and now if you double tap the button, it goes full stiff until you double tap it again. We love that feature. It's really cool. It gives the driver just that much more control, and if you come into a rock garden that's longer than you thought it was, or a whoop section you weren't expecting, double tap that button and you are good to go until you want to go back into your base setting. And now for an honorable mention, we have to talk about the much lauded, much loved Polaris Ride Command. This is the ultimate model. It also comes on the slightly lower trim, the premium model. And as with all versions of Ride Command, there are more than 1 million miles of mapped trails built into this thing. It will also do communication for group rides. It also controls the 1400 watt stereo. It will tell you where you are, where you've been, where you're going, and how to get back to the trailhead. It is excellent. We've said it 1 million times. We wish more manufacturers could come up with a system that's as good as this is. So those are the 5 things we love about the 2025 Polaris RZR Pro S, and now it's time for the negatives. The 5 things we hate about it. Number 1, with a bullet, is the price. This thing is $36,999 before destination, taxes, or dealer's fees. That's a lot of money in anybody's book. It's especially a lot of money for a side-by-side, and well, I'm just not sure there are enough features here to justify the price. This is the Pro S Ultimate. It is the most expensive one we could have gotten our hands on, but hear me out here. I think the lower trim, the premium, is the go. Stepping down to the premium will save you $6,000. The 2-door version of that rig is $30,999 out the door. You get Ride Command, you get the seats, you get nice harnesses, you get a bunch of great features, and you save yourself some money. That lets you get into the accessories catalog or the aftermarket and really make the rig your own. So with those kind of savings available in Polaris's lineup, we just have a hard time justifying the sticker for this thing. And keep in mind, there may be variations in price depending on what incentives your local power sports dealer has going on. But if there aren't, you're going to be close on $40,000 by the time you're out the door, and that's just a ton of money. We mentioned the aftermarket a second ago, and that leads us nicely into the second thing we hate about it. You're going to have to budget for a new set of tires. These things are okay if you live in Arizona or California or somewhere where it's rocky and dry most of the time. Out here in East Tennessee, it ain't, and these things can get slick as snot when the trail gets a little mucky. The tires are an okay size. We really like the wheels. We love this 5-lug bolt pattern, and we know that tires are the first thing anybody changes on a rig, but when you're spending as much as you spend on this thing, it's kind of tough to budget another $1,500 or so for a set of new meats. Number 3, the third thing we hate, is the size. Now on paper, this thing is pretty short and tight. It's just over 10 feet long with an 8-foot wheelbase, but in person, it feels way bigger than that. Part of that is because it's wide. It is 74 inches wide, which is just as wide as its big brother, the Pro R. But more than that, it's tall. This thing is 74 inches tall. I'm about 5'10", and it dwarfs me. It feels even bigger when you look at this ROPS. Now, yes, it's nice and chunky, it feels super secure, but it looks big, it looks heavy, and it adds to the overall sense of mass that this thing has. And speaking of mass, that translates to the spec sheet. This thing is 2,142 pounds dry, according to Polaris. Now, if you need a reminder, that means without fuel, not ready to rip. That's what it weighs in the crate. When you start putting in fuel and oil and coolant, you're probably up closer to 2,300 by the time you're ready to hit the trail. That is huge. Side-by-sides in general are getting bigger, but we would love it if this thing felt as compact as it actually is. The fourth thing we hate about this rig is the bed. It's nice and long and it's fairly deep, but that's where its attributes stop. It is too narrow, the drainage is inadequate, and the tie-down points are woeful. We have a big bag in here today and it's tied down okay, but we really had to improvise to get it to fit. We had to feed some strap through what Polaris says is a tie-down point, but it is too narrow to get the hook of a ratchet strap around it. That means you're gonna have to figure out securing your load yourself. This thing will hold about 300 pounds, but we're not sure what weighs 300 pounds that you could fit back here. We'd like to see the bed be a little bit better thought out. Now, we know that this thing is not a rec ute rig, it's not a utility rig, It's a sports side-by-side. Cargo capacity should be a tertiary concern, but we'd really like to see them think this out a little bit better. And to round it out, the fifth thing we hate about this machine is that there really aren't any tie-down points, especially up front. You get this little nubby bumper, but otherwise you have to improvise where you're gonna put your straps when you put this thing on the trailer. Now, Polaris figured this out with the 2024 RZR XP. That thing has little tow hooks all over it. It is a breeze to cinch down on your trailer. And when you've got an investment as big as this is, you wanna make sure that it's secure when you're rolling down the road. And after a long day on the trail, you're tired, it would be such a huge benefit to just be able to wang a hook on here, strap it down, and hit the road, and you can't with this rig. You have to think it through a little bit more clearly. It feels like an easy fix, and we would love to see Polaris update it. And now for our honorable mention. We had an honorable mention in the love category, so we gotta have one for the hates. It's this key. It is way too easy to leave this key in the accessory position when you turn it off. So we turn it to run. I'm not gonna actually turn the rig on, but you turn it to run. That shuts the ignition off, but it doesn't shut down the ride command or the lights. That makes it super easy to walk away from your rig and go have a bite to eat while the accessories are still on. When you come back, the battery's dead. There's a hard detent that you have to click through to get the thing to turn all the way off. We know that this is a small issue, and that's why we made it the honorable mention, but we'd be remiss if we didn't mention it, and here's why. I went to start this thing in our shop the other day, and the key had been left just a little bit on, and the battery was dead, and I had to charge it. This thing has like, I don't know, 200 miles on it. It would just be nice if it could just be easily shut off, and there's not that hard detent, and there's nothing to think about. Every time I park this rig, I gotta double check. It's just one more step. So that's everything we love and hate about the 2025 Polaris RZR Pro S Ultimate. Time to talk about who this machine is for. And actually, Polaris gave us a cheat sheet when they released this. See, when they clarified the naming convention for the RZR Pro lineup, they also delineated what each machine in the lineup is for. The RZR Pro R, obviously, for those people who want to go out and go desert racing, or if you live in Phoenix and there's millions of miles of BLM land around you with wide open 2-tracks and you can just put your foot to the floor and let those 225 ponies eat, the Polaris RZR Pro R is for you. The Pro S is for someone like us who lives in a place where the trails are tighter and you don't have as much access to being wide open, but you still want horsepower, you still want great suspension, and you like a little bit wider track width. It allows you to go play on a 2-track, to go blast through some whoops, but it doesn't fall apart quite as much when you hit a rock garden or when you want to go rock crawling. So, the Polaris RZR Pro S is for the person who this is maybe your second or third side-by-side. You've got your sea legs under you. You know how they handle and you want speed, but you don't need the all-out weaponry that the Pro R provides. The Pro S is your huckleberry. It comes in enough flavors through the trim packages that you can go mild to wild. You can buy a stripped-down model and build it yourself, or you can buy the cowboy Cadillac behind me and get all the creature comforts and luxuries that Polaris offers. If you're that person, you should head out and check out a Pro S at your local power sports dealer. So that's it for this video, folks. Thank you so much for watching. Why don't you go down in the comments below, let us know, are we on base or are we being unfair to the Pro S? Then head over to utvdriver.com 5 days a week where we've got news, reviews, and buyer's guides on all the machines you can think of, including this one. We've got a bunch of reviews, and then you can check out our social media channels. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok 7 days a week. We'll catch you later.